if you can have us involved sooner, we'll probably save you money on, you know, grind stock, setup, and everything will flow through faster with humps or bumps, and you're not like hitting all those things on the first article. I like how we're just getting after it.
Yeah, we're just getting.
We didn't.
It,
I thought this was gonna be about manufacturing. We're just getting into it. It's coming up over the top of the boots.
I think in a roundabout way, it all comes back to manufacturing.
I think don't be afraid of doing new things. Like when you and I met, you said, "Hey, have you ever done a podcast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, one," and it got us a huge customer.
So, welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Today I have Andy Wilkosz with me, the owner of Peter's Heat Treating and another company at least that does laser hardening.
Laser hardening, laser heat treating.
Yep. So excited to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm super pumped to have you because I think that you bring an interesting perspective to some of the talks that I have with other manufacturers. You work with a lot more manufacturers probably than a lot of the manufacturers that I work with. So one of the things that I want to hear about from you today was just kind of what's your perspective of the manufacturing space right now? What's your finger on the pulse? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so a lot of people look to us for that. I know our relationship with our banker. We used to have quarterly meetings, and he would come to Meadville, and we'd go to Chovy's and meet. And as a heat treater, you are a funnel. So all the tool makers, whether they're productions or onesie twosies, you're seeing what's happening. And right now, the space is a little bit weird. You can definitely feel some tension. A lot of people, they understand that we have our finger on the pulse, and they're like, "Hey, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
And you can tell that where it's coming from is that they're a little bit unsure and scared, and they want to know how insured and or scared anybody else is, because that warm blanket of, well, at least everybody else is doing bad too, or at least
Right.
but the reality is it seems like you're either hot or you're not. And there's a lot. Aerospace is up. We're not in that space as much as I'd like to be, but that area is still very, very hot. But yeah, it's very hot or cold. It's spotty. I'd say it's like very few people are just normal.
So do you think the aerospace is hot because that's kind of really adjacent to the government itself?
For sure. I know. I was talking with somebody yesterday. A lot of our military adjacent stuff is way up.
Yeah.
Like way up. Like you can kind of, we know what we hear and see in the media and everything, but I can tell you like what's coming in the door is interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of that is way up.
So what would you say is like down? Is there a sector
Automotive,
that you're seeing?
automotive,
Okay.
and sadly, John Deere
Yeah.
just had all those massive layoffs, and kind of jumping way back to where you started. I like to consider us hyper diversified. You said a lot of the other manufacturers you work for, they might have, 10 accounts or something like that, and that you mentioned you got MBA, and that's kind of the standard rule is like, don't spread yourself out over everybody, because you have to manage all these accounts. And so over the course of a year, we might have 1,600 accounts, which is
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
bananas.
Yeah,
And
that's
some
huge.
of them might be, top companies would be trucking, ag, and probably firearm components and things of that nature.
Okay.
So our biggest customers are each one of them is about 5% of our book, down to if Uncle Teddy sends us one hunting knife at Christmas that he wants to do, we will heat treat it. So,
Really?
Yeah. So we will have our accounts go from hundreds of thousands of dollars to, we have $33 accounts.
So is that just your diversification concept? Like a lot of companies are going to kind of shy away from that much smaller business
Makes no
simply
sense.
because it makes no sense financially. So
It makes no
what
sense.
is kind of your reasoning for it?
I think we talked earlier about initially when you were trying to find yourself in the space you wanted to be in, maybe you were in a role for 2 weeks and you're like, I'm out, right?
Yeah.
And you wanted to work for yourself because you have you have your own core values, and you have your own guideposts and everything of that nature. So something that's really important to us is Doug Peters, my father-in-law, started the company a little over 40 years ago.
Yep.
And it was in Meadville was where we started. That's still where our headquarters is. A lot of the spirit of Meadville is these 1 and 2 man tool shops.
Yeah.
And you don't want to, you got to know who brought you to the dance, right? And I think it's really important to not ostracize that community, because that community is all you really have. You have to have these core values. And that's kind of been a little bit of how we try to figure out who and what we are, because we want to help just be part of small success and big success, but we don't want to tie ourselves down. So it's been interesting navigating that space and the pricing structure so that you can still service who got you there, but also be able to go after bigger accounts, because the reality of it is all the platitudes. If you're not growing, you're dying. And we need to grow. And if we hadn't grown to service some of these big accounts, we might not exist to service the small ones. Right. So I kind of jumped all over there.
Well, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. So, I mean, there's kind of 2 reasons why you do that. And I'll get into how we approach that as well. But number one, you want to help people out. I mean, that's one of your core values, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that, I guess where I was going with that is that's one of the fun things of having your own business. You don't always have to do something that makes sense in an Excel sheet right now.
Right.
Okay. Like right before the pandemic, we decided we wanted to consolidate both of our Meadville locations. And buildings suck. You know what I mean? You're going to spend $1 million on a building, and all you did is get all the cows in one barn.
Right.
Okay.
Tons of overhead.
Tons of overhead. You're not necessarily making any money, but culturally, we felt like it was going to be a huge win. For even lifestyle stuff. I was driving around to 4 facilities, trying to make sure everything was going right between McCain, the old facility at Ray Street, or Westmead facility, and Laserhard. So I had a lot of just windshield time, which isn't always the most valuable time.
Right.
But
that's when you need a driver.
Yeah, and that wasn't in the budget, right? So
my cousin and I were just talking about that. He's like, I'd really like to have a driver, and I'm like, I think the time when it makes sense to have a driver is when you're conducting business nonstop while that driver is driving. You don't just do it just because you think it's cool, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because that goes back to the value set. I was having a talk with another person last week, and they were a little bit frustrated with the amount of time that they had with their family, and because you get home and you got 4 hours with your kids,
right?
And like, do you really want to spend an hour mowing the lawn?
No.
And do you really want to spend an hour making dinner and doing dishes? And so I think, as somebody who's grown up in McCain, and you have these, like, where your different value sets come from, yes, I can go ahead and I can subcontract out mowing the lawn. I can subcontract out, doing dinner. But, when it comes down to like our health and what our children see, I think I'm still wrestling with some of that, right?
That's a really interesting perspective, because I don't know if I've thought about it to that depth, because it's not just the time, it is what you're showing your children. If they kind of grow up with this concept, like everything should be done for you and you shouldn't be wasting time doing these menial tasks, that's not really something that you want them to believe, right?
Right. And I think just even the term like waste, you don't want to burn daylight, you don't want to waste time. And it's like, it's like, I think I have this weird belief that I've never really tried to discuss, where it's like, I think there's a lot of value in my children, we have 3 kids, seeing dad mow the lawn, run the weed whacker, run the push mower.
Yeah.
And, that's 3 hours out of the week. And maybe that's time I could have, should have had with them. But my brother and I, so growing up, I wasn't allowed to use the weed whacker when I was like, 8 years old, because my dad didn't want me to nick the trees. So we had hand clippers.
Sure.
And we lived we had a lot of trees and a lot of fence posts, and you had to go around and trim around every post with the hand clippers, and you had a little 5-gallon bucket that you're putting all the trimmings in. And my brother and I joke about it because it seems like, am I like redoing the circle of abuse with my kids, or are you like really learning the value of something? Because there's all those other moments that really have a lot of value. Like, so when you get your weed whacker and everything out in the spring, or in the fall, did you put the stable in? You know, when you go ahead and start everything up,
right?
Are you having to use starter fluid? How are you taking care of it?
All those little
all those little things. And like with my oldest son, I try to narrate the principle as we do the task. So it's not really about like practicing drums with Peyton. It's like, this is how we learn. You know what I mean? This is not really about mowing the lawn. This is like taking care of your property and paying attention to, it's like, okay, these trees are getting old. And it's just trying to pull everything in. And it's just like, I don't know how. I haven't thought about how would I facilitate that without the wasted time of that. So I think it's a tricky thing. Or our food, right? Our food is so jacked up right now in terms of like, Americans just want to eat chemicals handed to them through a window, right? Like, we've somehow normalized a person can hand you food through a window and you unwrap it and you think that's normal.
Yeah, it's not.
It's crazy, right? So I don't know. How do you balance some of these things?
Well, and I think it almost, so your kids are a little bit older, right? How old is your oldest son?
8.
Than mine, anyways.
Yeah.
Right?
8, 5, and 3.
Okay, so 8, 5, and 3. Yeah, and my oldest child is 3.5, and then I have a 4-month-old. So I think that balance between hiring somebody to do the things that are time consuming might shift over time. So right now, I don't have as much of like my child accompanying me while I'm doing these things.
Right.
So it is taking away from the lesson giving and things like that. But as they get older, they're going to be doing those things with me. And even now, like when I mow the lawn, Livy's like, I want to come too. So she jumps on the lawnmower with me, and she gets bored after a little while, but I am kind of talking to her about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely something. But I really like that perspective, because it's not wasted time if you're doing it with your child and if you're giving them lessons while you're doing it. And so maybe that's when you decide between hiring somebody to do something and not, is if you can share that moment with your kid.
And like what you said, where it's just, once again, it's not really about the rule, it's about the nuance, right? Where it's just like, or if your child's only 1 or 2 and they can't even really be cognizant of what's happening, go ahead and don't do it. And then onboard it when it is the right time, and then offboard it when it isn't. And I think that's just the spectrum of everything, right? Because you'd like to, and that's the other thing. It's like, what do you want to teach your child, right? Like, you could, because there's a right way to do everything. You could hire somebody to do the lawn care, but then now you need to narrate why you're doing that, what you're doing with your time, because there's a lot of value in teaching your child what to have somebody else do, right? Like, I've had these little daydreams of like, when Peyton gets older, we'll buy a trailer and, 0 turn and a weed whacker, and then rather than hiring somebody else like, Lawn Pro or Lawn Masters, whatever, to mow our lawns for Peters, I'll pay Peyton, and then, or he can do whatever he wants, right? Maybe he decides he'll mow other people's lawns. Maybe he decides he doesn't like it and he hires another kid to do it, right? Like, whatever. But it's tricky, right? I think, at least as a parent and a business owner, I'm always hoping that I'm serving the greater good of the community of our employees, the community of our families, and all that other stuff. And it's tricky, you know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of always going around the loop.
Yeah, and there is no guidebook that tells us exactly how to balance everything, right? But one thing I can tell from talking to you is that you're a thoughtful person, and that I'm curious to know where this came from. Like, so how were you raised? Like, how did you become the person that's thinking about the things that you're eating and the things that you're teaching your children, the ways that you're, teaching your employees and treating your employees? Because for you and I mean, that's just the way that we operate, right? Like, we wouldn't do it any other way. We wouldn't even think about it. But there's a lot of people out there that don't think that way, that just stop by McDonald's. They feed their kids hot dogs for dinner and macaroni and cheese and, pump them full of vaccines and things of that nature. So,
Right.
so what kind of guided you on your path to, kind of a thoughtful approach to things?
Never really thought about that. In full disclosure, our kids do eat like Smith's hot dogs, right? So there's a time and a place for everything, right? So right. That's not the mainstay, but yeah. Right. I think I'm.
And if you're gonna eat the hot dogs, Smith's hot dogs are
with the natural casings.
Right.
Yeah.
Only way to go.
Shout out to Smith's. I think. I'm just lucky in a lot of ways, right? Like I was born into a family and I was very fortunate enough to have two parents that cared about me and cared about life. My father was a union lineman, working for Penelec, climbing poles, got all of his money through overtime and just, really working his butt off. My mom stayed at home with the kids for a period of time, and then once we got older, she worked at Edinburgh University as a secretary.
Okay.
And I was just really blessed, lucky, whatever the words are, to have people give you values. I was raised Catholic, was confirmed. I have some of my own opinions through that whole wheel. You know what I mean?
That could be a fun topic to get into because I was raised in a very religious environment as well, and we always have interesting conversations when you have, kids that came from devout, either Catholic or Protestant. I actually have so when you were talking about heat treating firearm parts, gun barrels and stuff, I have a customer that owns a company called Douglas Barrels. And they're down in West Virginia. He actually owns a company in Meadville as well, Red Industrial Products. And so he's very, very analytical, very philosophical, very Catholic. And so when I went down to visit his facility with him, we had so many great conversations over some beers about religion and about politics and about life. But anyways, I'm sorry I interrupted your story. So your family was Catholic. Was it a big family?
Yeah, so, depends on how you want to define it, but my mom's one of 7, and all the brothers and sisters lived on the same road. So all my aunts and uncles lived on my road, because my grandma had a farm. They kind of divided the plots up, and like the general life cycle was you got like a little 5-acre plot from like grandma and granddad. Everybody kind of started in like a single wide, then you worked your job, because back that was still middle class and whatnot at that time, and then people built houses, and so I grew up around my mom's family, because she's, like I said, one of 7, all my cousins. My dad's one of 5, but in terms of our immediate family, it's mom, dad, and I have one brother.
Yeah, that's a really cool concept. So there's a big farm, and all the family members kind of got lots on it and built houses eventually. Yeah, that's really neat. I mean, we have kind of a similar situation on Silverthorne Road. So my parents were so my uncle was one of the originals. My parents bought a lot 2 houses down from him. 15, 20, actually 30 years later, I purchased a house on Silverthorne, and all just kind of by happenstance. So then I have 2 cousins that have their own houses, I don't know, half a mile up the way, and then my uncle lives another half a mile up. So we kind of had that similar situation where we're all on the same road. People are zooming over to people's houses on the side by side, and it's pretty cool. I mean, I think the world would be a different place if you had family living close to each other, supporting each other, influencing each other. I mean, I think it's really important.
I agree. I think, and that goes back to like, well, that's why we want to continue to do onesie twosie jobs and why it makes sense. But I think, nuance, and I think almost like I kind of consider it like a dilation of perspective, I think is really important, right? Because if you're too close to the picture on the wall, you can't see that it's crooked, right?
Right.
And I think there's like, it's important. I feel, yeah, so this goes back to where did my perspective come from? But so I grew up in a small town, grew up in McCain,
Yep.
but then I couldn't wait to go to college and get out of there, right? So I went to Penn State, and then I lived in Pittsburgh, like in the city,
Okay.
for 7.5 years.
Oh, wow.
In the city, just
That's a big change.
yeah, big change. And so like on Friday, I'd park my car and I wouldn't get back in it until I had to go back to work on Monday, because you could walk to everything and do everything.
Yep.
And then lived in Austin, Texas, pre-Rogan era, like 11 to 15. And then, when we wanted to have a family, we knew that Erie County or Crawford County was the place to be, because my wife's from Crawford County. I'm from, Erie County. So that made sense. But I think it also means a lot to go out and see a little bit of the world, and then kind of come back to it, so that you appreciate that. I wouldn't have appreciated family, and I wouldn't have appreciated community as much if I didn't have it for a period of time.
Right.
And that's almost like we talked about religion for a second, like I was confirmed Catholic, but none of my kids are baptized, and we're kind of finding our way back to that, because there's the whole John Prine thing about like, eat a lot of peaches and find Jesus on your own. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes working your way through the problem is important. And I would argue that the amount of time I probably spent questioning faith and religion as a younger person probably almost worked its way into my engineering skill set of how to break down a problem and really think about things on a granular level, because you're chasing first principles,
right,
which I think is important.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent my entire life thinking about the same things, because I was raised fundamental Baptist and, very, very strict environment. Some people might even call it cultish. But we were homeschooled mostly for religious reasons. And I had a lot of dissatisfaction with the way that I grew up. Just you felt like you didn't have the social interaction. You didn't go to high school, you didn't play sports. And there are ways obviously to homeschool where, you do get more involved, but, it's really for religious reasons, we weren't supposed to be kind of around that group. That wasn't the type of believers that we were. So I kind of went hard the other direction, when I had the first opportunity. And I joined the Marine Corps, did that for 4 years, really didn't have too much interest in religion. And over the years, I've really gotten involved in like spirituality and kind of the New Age philosophy, and there's a lot of things that work about that, but I think they don't answer the fundamental questions. What is the origin of morality? Because it isn't necessarily inherent with all people, because obviously we have people that operate very diabolically. And so, you spend a lot of time thinking about that, and then you're looking at the world today and looking at these two very much opposing forces. And I see things really in terms of good and evil, and I think it's a big product of the way that I grew up. And I think a lot of that's kind of leading me back to my origins in some ways, because you have to be able to build a model for the world. And really the only way that things make sense is that there is an evil side and there's a good side. And which side do you want to fall on? Which side are you aligning yourself with?
Yeah, but once again, I think that goes back to like the dilation of perspective, because some things, I don't know, it's just hard, because I think while there is black and white out there, I think that's the minority. I think there's a lot of gray, because everything fades in between, right? Like if you think like, as you get tighter and tighter on any single thing, like here's an element, and then there's an atom, then there's the nucleus, there's right, always space in between, so you can't really subdivide anything in a way. So trying to subdivide anything kind of seems like a fruitless task, right? So and I think I'll probably stutter for a moment, but it's so Kurt Vonnegut has a poem. It's like it's something along the lines of what's tigers tigers gotta hunt, birds gotta fly, man has to ask himself why, tiger has to sleep, bird has to land, man has to tell himself he understands. And so I think, and there's even, because you're not supposed to name God, because when you name him, you've defined him. And if you define anything, you limit it. So I think
Yep.
I don't know. I'm always afraid to, I'm sorry that I'm being so contrarian, but I think classifying things as good and evil, it's just really hard. Because I think it's all a matter of perspective.
I do think I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you for the most part. So I agree with you, and I might completely agree with you, but in the context of when you build a religion, you are inherently creating a box around the concept of God. You're saying we've defined the barriers. Like, this is what you wear, this is what you drink, this is what you eat, this is where you go on Sunday, and you're saying that God says that, and that's inherently an interpretation of what God says, because God did not directly say that. And so I think, yes, in a lot of ways, religion itself is a box that defines God. And so I think one good thing that I learned from my spiritual quest over the years was the perspective that God is much bigger than any box that any religion has put him in. And I think I guess it hasn't drawn any fine conclusions for me, but I think the one thing that we can look at is the absolutes that we do know exist. Like, for example, spending time with your kids and training them is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of very, very defined things, and treating your customers well, treating people with love is a good thing, right? So I think there is black and white when it comes to those defined topics.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not. Yes, I agree with all of that. There is black and white, but I think the lion's share of the work is navigating the gray.
Right.
And I might butcher it, but yeah, somebody had a conversation at a bar that went somewhere this way, and he had a very eloquent way of saying it, but it was something along the lines of like, religion is the politicalization of spirituality.
Yeah.
Because you're almost like, because you're trying to like, put lines around something you can't.
And also kind of the monetization of spirituality.
Yeah. Which is a thing that I have some problems with as well.
I completely agree.
The spiritual, I hate saying I'm a spiritual person because it feels so woo-woo and it feels so wokey and icky at times, but it's like, I struggle with it, right? Like, I deeply am grateful for the, fundamental Christian values that I was raised with.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's but then again, like I said, it's how am I raising my own children is, tricky with it. It's hard being a parent, being a person. It's hard.
I think I've decided that my kids do need to be involved with Christianity. And there's only so many outlets for that, right? Like, how do you get them involved in Christianity without involving them in a church, right?
Yeah.
So you may not agree with everything that the church professes or advocates, but I think it's just your job to do at home to kind of clarify those things. But I do think that having a religious context for the world and a spiritual context for the world is something that humans need. I mean, I think that history's shown us that over and over and over again. And there's actually a set of things that I think are absolutely vital to have a thriving culture and a strong culture. And you hear a lot of like dirty talk about nationalism. People are like super critical of it these days and stuff. And that's one way of saying it's kind of an ugly word, because it brings back, historic memories. But I prefer to call it like patriotism, right? So let's just talk about having a sense of national pride. I think humans need to belong on teams. I think people need to have a team spirit, no matter where you go. I mean, even, I was talking to one of my buddies from the Marine Corps, and he said, when you're in the Marine Corps, you have this group of Marines. So that's kind of your broad identity. But then you hone in on people in the Marine Corps that are from your state, or that like the same sports team as you, or, the Mexicans would all hang out with the Mexicans, and the blacks would all hang out with the blacks. And nobody was telling them to do this. It's just people generally find their team, the people that they most identify with. And I think what we're seeing in this culture today is this harsh criticism of anything that really goes back to those fundamental human needs, religion, national identity. So there's a lot of these things that we're saying, hey, we don't need these anymore, and we're losing our way as a country because of it.
Yeah, all that stuff is it's tough. It's tricky. You know what I mean? Navigating that space, because I don't know. I was always pretty fluid when it came to some of those things. Like I had, when I was in college, like I was getting a chemical engineering degree. I was playing in a band, and then I just had people that I liked because I liked them, right? So I kind of would go between these different groups of like, all right, I'm hanging out with these. I stayed in the engineering dorm, right, for my first year, right? So it's nerd. Nerd is a word I can say, right? So I'm hanging around with these nerds. I'm hanging around with these arty kids, and I'm hanging around with these party kids, right? And so it's tough because I kind of found myself going between groups. And even as I, formed the person that I am now, it's like I very much care about a lot of liberal things, right? Like in terms of certain social aspects, because I played in bands and I was part of different scenes, but then other things it's like I'm hyper conservative on, and it's really, really hard. And I do agree that we need to have a unifying structure, and trying to have a form of pride, not in the sinful kind of pride, but trying to have an American pride is important, right? Like we need to try to focus more on onshoring things, bringing manufacturing back, and having control of our own destiny. Yep. And I think and the American mindset is just so short right now. Like we went through COVID, we learned all these things, and then now here we go again. We're going to go ahead and not worry about where certain things are coming from. We're not going to worry about where our raw materials are coming from. We're not going to worry about that sort of stuff because we forget, and we just want to like focus on these like quarterly profits or weekly metrics or update calls.
Right.
And I think if we can go back to like a better sense of community and family and all that sort of stuff and try to take care of each other, then I think the whole thing would fix itself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that a lot of people fall more into the category of middle ground, I guess. Than we would be led to believe through the media, through social media, because you have this very vocal minority that's projecting the idea that everyone believes this thing. And so I think a lot of people feel that way, and unfortunately we're forced into these two parties. Hey, if you believe in abortion, then you have to be part of this party. If you don't, then you're part of this party. And I mean, obviously abortion is a complex topic that, I don't know that we're ever going to figure out, but I don't think it should be the basis for our political stance.
No, it should be just like you talked about, like if you believe in you want to get off the spirituality bus and into like taking your children to church, you got a car ride to and from there where you can go ahead and explain what you think your differences are. Right. If you think something, outside of what was said. And and that's kind of where we're at now, where I feel like it's tough finding a political point that lands everything. You're gonna have to, and that goes back to the black and white thing, where it's like you're gonna end up in a bucket, and you might not believe with all of it. But that's why we have to have nuance, and we have to have discussions.
Yep.
You know, I really like talking to different people about, like I said, you're hard right. Let's talk about it. You're hard left. Let's talk about it. And I really like to hear why people think what they think and why they think what they think. I think it's important because that helps you come to the table to understand, okay, how can we work together? Because that's what I want to do. You know what I mean?
You have to. I mean, you can't. And I'm going to butcher this, but I was listening to a podcast. I honestly cannot remember which podcast it was, but the topic was super, super interesting. And they were describing or making an analogy between a husband and a wife relationship. And there's some sort of it's called the bird test. I don't know if you've heard about this, but basically if the one spouse comments, "Hey, I see a bird," and the other spouse doesn't say, "Oh, what kind of bird do you see?" or something to that effect, then the relationship is not going to work. It's like this super simple test
that's fun.
that indicates whether or not this couple can discuss an issue and is interested in what the other person has to say about it. And the point that this podcast was moving towards was that in our country today, we can't pass the bird tests between the parties. We can't have discussions about anything. And we're also experiencing this situation where a certain group feels very marginalized because any points that we make are dampened. So I could say whatever I want on Facebook, but they're only going to show it to the people that agree with me.
Well, Mr. Zuckerberg apologized for that yesterday.
Oh yeah, Thanks for your very late apology, man. Yeah, blame the government for your whatever multi-decade experience of diabolical behavior. But yeah, I'm glad that it at least came to light to some degree. I mean, we all knew it was going on, but now he's saying, yeah, it was going on. I don't know what that means. What does that mean about Mark? Is he coming around, or what's happening here?
I think it's probably a little of both, right? Like maybe he's coming around, but also if there's going to be a change in administration and he might have to answer to somebody else, is he posturing to kind of so he's not caught flat-footed?
Right.
Hard to say.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds accurate. That makes sense. Just to play. Yeah. Thank God for Elon. I mean, thank God for that guy.
Yeah, it only took what a South African on the spectrum with multiple companies to save America, right? It's completely ridiculous, but I guess that's the nature. I like to say God's a funny guy.
Yeah. It's a lot of times it does feel like a big joke.
Yeah.
But so speaking of controversial issues,
I like how we're just getting after it.
Yeah,
right?
we're just getting.
We didn't. I thought this was going to be about manufacturing. We're just getting into it. It's coming up over the top of the boots.
I think in a roundabout way, it all comes back to manufacturing, because people ask why I'm so passionate, why I like talking about manufacturing. I think without manufacturing, and I don't even think this isn't even an opinion, it's a fact. Without manufacturing, your country has no stability. That is the foundation upon which you can base much of everything else that goes on. Without exports, you don't have a GDP, right? So it's the most fundamental element of an economy. And over the years working with manufacturers, it seems like they're being really marginalized. You just look at the PA state budget. Now, I'm a big fan of just like government stay out of our business and just let us operate. But the simple fact of the matter is they're already taking 40% of our income, probably more than that if you factor in the taxes you pay on the things that you buy and everything like that. But since they're already taking it, let's look at what they're spending it on, okay? And I think the largest part of the pie chart is K through 12. And okay, we can make an argument why that makes sense. But then when you look at the rest of the pie chart and you look at the things that they're investing in from an economic development standpoint, they don't make any sense. They make no sense whatsoever. So my argument is if you were to take that economic development budget that I wish wasn't taxed in the first place, but since it is, how are we going to use it? I think that the best place to invest that would be into manufacturers.
I agree. I mean, I think manufacturing's, like you said, it's everything. It's how we get to work. It's the tools doctors use. It's how we defend our country. It's everything. And we just spent way too long. And I think once again, it's a pendulum swing, right? So it's just like we saw manufacturing go away, and then why would I get an engineering degree if I can have an accounting degree? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying accounting's bad, but or why am I going to get an engineering degree, or even get a degree at all, or invest in manufacturing if I can make more money playing in the media space or being a TikTok star,
right,
or something like that. And go back to Mr. Musk. I don't think you need to have a college education. There's a pretty good argument for how broken that system is, right? Yep. And I got an undergrad and MBA, but some of the most talented people on our team don't have college degrees.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Our management team's a hybridization of engineer, degreed folks and people who have worked their way up and just been awesome at what they're doing. And I think culturally we really put a lot of stigma to doing dirty work. But that goes back to, what do you do? Are you going to pay somebody to mow your lawn, or are you going to mow the lawn yourself? Right. And how do we bring that sexy back? Because once you have the principle, okay, I want to bring manufacturing back. Well, now you got to pull the people into that space.
Right.
How do we do it? And I think manufacturing's done a terrible job at selling itself in a lot of ways, because a lot of people want that instant gratification. And I think manufacturing is one of the best places to do that in. People in our shop, they can start a job and finish a job, and they can see what's done. This, you wouldn't have been able to use this hammer, and now it's hard and it's done at the end of your shift, right?
Yeah.
You can see actual things you're doing. This piece of equipment's broken. That's my Pennsylvania coming out. and then by the end of the shift, you've troubleshot it,
yep,
you figured it out, and you've done it, and you feel really good,
yep, that
you accomplished something. And I just wish that had been sold a little bit better to me as a young person. Mm-hmm. That you can really make an impact in your life, the company, your team, and then really for your country and
broader
everything.
Community,
yeah.
And I mean, this is a conversation that we have quite often. I have quite often with other manufacturers. And how do you sell the sexy of it? And I think there's two parts to it. Number one, you have to sell the idea of work as an end in itself. Okay, so the old saying, idle hands are the devil's playground. I mean, it's true. It is true. I mean, I can see that in my own life. The more busy I am, the less time I have to get into other stuff. And there's also that sense of self-worth that's built through work, and especially physical labor. I mean, I'm in the digital marketing space. I build websites, manage these projects, sell clients. And I have this strong need for a physical outlet. And I mean, I own a piece of property. I chop wood, man.
Yeah.
I saw things down.
Yeah, warms you twice, right?
I went out and build a cabin in the woods behind my house. And so these are the things that I like to do. because I realize how much, as a man, as a human, I need that sort of physical outlet. So I think number one, that concept, if I'm the PA state government, I am creating commercials around that message. I am pushing that. I'm putting it on billboards. I'm pushing it in schools. I'm pushing the idea that work is not something that you're trying to get out of. It's something that you're getting something bigger out of.
Oh, for sure, right? Like, yeah, because learn how to maybe run the equipment, then learn how to fix the equipment, then learn how to manage the people doing those things, and you keep learning more and more about yourself and your team, and you're kind of like working to your own highest power, right? Like, because I think going back to like the whole God thing, it's like I think really, maybe God is just you hitting your own asymptote, and only you know what that is, right? And only you know when you're being lazy, and only you know when you could do better, and only you know when you could have served everybody better, right? So maybe, and I think that needs to be part of everything. And the reality of it is I recently interviewed somebody, and they hit me up with something that I loved. Like, he likes writing, but he was also in the military, and he got an engineering degree, and he was like, somebody told me it'd probably be easier being a writer, engineer that writes than a writer that engineers. And I thought, wow, that's really, because for me it's like, had things gone the other way, I would have been. I thought I would be happier as a musician, right?
Right.
But I don't think I'd have the kids I have, and I don't think I'd have the life I have had I not stuck with engineering.
Yep.
And I've had a lot of great life experiences and musical experiences being a engineer that does music than the other half, right?
I'm glad you gave that comparison, because I was trying to wrap my head around the original statement and was trying to think, what does that mean exactly? But yeah, that was a great example. Right. So you're focus on the skill set that matters first, and then
that's going to serve the community, right? Like, and there's some people that are going to be better at the music, and the way that they serve the community is by sharing those gifts with those people. But for me, it was like, well, maybe it'll be better for me to use my engineering skills to do this thing that helps grow a business, create more jobs for more families, help my own family, and do the other stuff in the spare time, right? Like, I still do music with my son. He takes drum lessons here in town, and he's in a little band, and we go down in the basement and we play, right? So people ask me, it's like, people from the past scene, hey, you still in bands? I'm like, yeah. And then I'll show them a video. It's like me and Peyton playing music in the basement. So yeah, it's fun. Things change.
So are you just a drummer? Are you a guitar? What do you play?
I used to play guitar in bands. Like when I lived in Pittsburgh, I was in a band, and we were like a mid-level band, like back in the CD era and stuff. Like,
getting a couple $100 for playing a gig.
But then you get enough couple $100 is you got a van, and we'd drive to like New York City, Boston, Philly, and we would do all that sort of stuff, and it was good times. Like, we were on the their NPR down in Pittsburgh. Like, they'd play our music and everything, so it was cool. It was a great experience. It was
what was the name of your band?
It was called Big Hurry, and it was awesome. I met everybody on Craigslist. You know what I mean? Which is like, that is like a good experience of itself, where it's like you're gonna go meet somebody, and like hopefully they don't stab you, or you're not a weirdo, but like you almost learn the interviewing process pretty quick, where it's like meet in a safe space where you can get out of there fast.
Right.
But it was a very much a formative experience. So
when you say meeting people on Craigslist, you're referring to potential band members?
Yeah, there was like a whole section like musicians wanted at, or something like that.
Gotcha.
So it's like you'd email back and forth, and eventually it worked. And
that's hilarious.
It was funny because we met as strangers, and then one day we were coming back from a trip, and it was like, these are my best friends in the van.
Yeah.
And like, because you just spend all this time with them.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens in hopefully if you have a great job, it's like, think about the people that I work with, and it's like, I love these people. You know what I mean? It's just like you spend so much time with them, you do so many things with them, Whereas when it first started out, it was like, it's a job and you're doing a thing, you're doing a task. But then eventually, the thing comes together. You're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, and actually, when you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of our conversation about kids' sports, because it's something that I've been a little apprehensive about. Because, when you have a kid, you're naturally losing your autonomy. I mean, because you have to take care of this little thing, and so you adjust to the first level of it, right? You're waking up in the middle of the night, and feeding the baby, changing diapers, all that kind of stuff. You can't maybe golf quite as much as you wanted and do it. And then you get to the age where they're in sports, and it's like, oh my gosh! So now you're telling me I got to drive an entire weekend and take them to Columbus, Ohio, and what And it's like, I'm a little apprehensive of that. But you brought up a really good point about it, in that you create your new social group through that, right? In a way.
I don't think it's on purpose, but yeah, that's for sure. But I think that's also part of the test, right? And that's why they don't come out at 8 years old, where you have to do all that stuff, right? Like parental amnesia is real, right? If you remembered everything, you'd probably only have one kid,
right?
Like, yeah, you're kind of tested as it goes up through the ranks. And as I talk to I like having friends that have older kids, because can kind of mentally prepare,
right?
Or even or it's good to have older friends, right? I remember in the band, Lenny turned 30, and I was still in my 20s. I'm like, well, Lenny's still cool. I'll be okay when I'm 30. You know what I mean? So it's just like you want to have that rabbit out in front of you. That's it makes it a little bit less scary to go down the path, right? But
yeah. Well, everything always works out, right? I mean, you figure things out as you go. And I mean, I think if you have good intentions and you're self-reflective, which, I mean, that's the one thing I really like about you. I can see that you're a reflective person. How old are you?
42.
42. Okay. All right. So you're one year older than me. Okay. That's why you are.
Yeah, but I got a lot more salt and pepper. My salt ratio is way higher than yours. So yeah.
Well, you've had the kids for a little bit longer.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
more kids.
I was having this conversation about the older generation. My dad's age, because I have a friend whose dad is in a similar age, and we talk about our struggles to encourage our dads to take better care of their health and walk a little bit and just do these things that we are so simple to us, but to them, they came from this generation where it was
they had no defenses.
Yeah.
They were not prepared for what came at them. Essentially, big marketing, big campaigns came at them. All the chemically infested food.
The food pyramid.
They had the food pyramid, right? Everything came at them, and they had no point of reflection prior to that, right? Mm-hmm. So they had no way to be prepared for that, and they just got bamboozled on a lot of that stuff. And
they're sticking to their guns about it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because change is tough, right? I like to think when we find an old problem and we want to work towards solving it. I always remind the team, fat man on a treadmill. Fat man on a treadmill. Okay, you're fat. You got on the treadmill. You just worked your butt off. You're drenched in sweat. Guess what? You're still fat.
Yeah.
It's day one. You got to keep showing up. You got to keep doing it. And I think it's hard once you've lived so long with a certain set of numbness, or it's hard to be reawakened to a thing. It's tough.
Yep.
I feel they got a tough road with some of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Yeah, and it becomes part of their identity, right? So now all of a sudden, if you have to change your beliefs, you have to change your identity, and that's the hard part.
Well, and then I think there's a lot of I think some of them have a lot of materialism, and their materialism almost justifies their identity. I know what Tim Dillon had a pretty funny line about, they lord over their property, right? Where it's you can't tell me I did it wrong, because look at my house,
right,
and look at this land, and look at what I did.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that the whole landscape's changed and their middle class is not our middle class, and everything's different. And I think it's they pick different points to kind of stick in at. But but that's another thing. It's like, well, okay, now we got to figure out how to bridge the gap, like, because they got to pass the torch, and we got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. Because now that we're in our 40s, this is beginning to be our show, right? So now it's like, it's our responsibility to pull the right people under the right tent and keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So, in terms of the fact that the torch is kind of in the process of being passed, and a lot of companies in your position, a lot of manufacturers out there are in this position where they have this aging workforce. These guys have to pass their knowledge on to a younger generation that, in a lot of cases doesn't really care to learn it. How are you approaching that challenge? How are you getting that next generation into your business and incorporating them and teaching them?
One of the things I really try to codify things as much as I can, and it seems like it's really lame and it goes against a lot of the other things that I've said, where it's like, I do believe the tradesman's approach is the best way, but it's tough to do that in a lot of ways, because that requires having enough, slack in the chain that you can strap somebody to this person for this period of time. And that isn't always going to be the case for a myriad of reasons.
Right.
So a lot of what we try to do is we try to codify things into policies and procedures. And we actually, I'll keep going with that. And then so you kind of have a general playbook of what you can go back to. But there's a lot of space in between all of that. And that's where you try to get them all the right on-the-job training, checklists, double verifications, and having a chain of command, right? Like everybody reports to somebody, but everybody's also completely accountable to the entire team. One thing that we've tried to do is we've tried to institute these fundamentals. So we came up with about 10 core principles that matter to us as a company. And what we do is we're trying to ritualize them, right? So you probably don't think about brushing your teeth in the morning. You probably don't think about brushing your teeth at night, but that's because it's a ritual. It's something you do.
Right.
And so we're trying to ritualize a lot of our core beliefs and values, which is more on the macro, but like the actual.
Can you give me an example of a couple of those core beliefs?
My wife's better at all this, right? So because I work with my wife, which is another interesting thing, right? So like one is like, use it up, right?
Okay.
Like that's one of them. So it's like, if you are going to do something, do it to the fullest. Like if we're using like masking paint, right?
Right.
Use every bit in the can, or if you're not going to, seal the can and make sure it's there, right?
Right,
or it's like the way we make our money as a heat treater, kind of like what we talked about, is we're a funnel. The way we can make, if we have bigger customers, they fill the furnace, right? But smaller customers, we might have to batch 10 different jobs together.
Yep.
So did you maximize that load?
I like that. I like how that core principle, it's a broad spectrum thing. I mean, you could apply that to filling a furnace, or you could apply it to using up the rest of the paint can.
Yeah, it's whatever. A lot of things like that. So that's one of them. Or just being accountable to others, like, or so well, actually, how about my favorite one is let data drive the bus. That's one of them.
Okay.
Right. That's one of my favorites. Let data drive the bus. I don't want to hear about like what Dave says or Nate says. Like, I'm a first principles guy, right? So it's like, okay, if they say that's the way to do it, let's look at why that is the way to do it. Oh, that is the way to do it. Like it's a best practices mentality, but usually if you're going to be accountable to everybody, you should be able to show your work. This is how we got here.
Yeah.
This is why it is what it is, or you know what? You thought this was a big problem and we had this big hubbub about something, but look at what it is. It's really nothing.
Yeah.
We thought this is a big problem, but it happens like 0.03% of the time. And it doesn't, when it happens, it doesn't snowball. It's like, give it grace, let it go, let's move on.
Right. It sounds like you're talking about something completely different right now.
Yeah, but yeah.
Because I mean, if you could apply the philosophy to pretty much anything, socially, economically, etc., I mean, things would be a lot different around here.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like the dilation thing. Like, so it should hopefully what you do at work is important to the task at hand, but can you zoom out and use it in your life too, right? Like,
right.
What are we? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it makes any sense.
No, it does make a lot of sense. Yeah, and I mean, I've come across this concept quite a bit of like having these core principles, not only in your business but also in your family, and they may be similar, they may be crossover, but I'm curious how you develop. How do you initially come up with the list?
We did it as like a management team. So basically, I think my wife's really good at funneling some of this stuff. So if I remember correctly, we all kind of came up with a list.
Yep.
And then we merged the list together, and then you're putting the sticky notes on the wall of which ones are actually kind of the same. Mm-hmm. How do we reword it? And then she works with a marketing company in Meadville. They did like little iconographs, like little images for each one and everything. Okay. And we have them posted around the shop, and it's kind of funny when you're head down in some of this stuff, because we had a large customer visit us. They're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, blah, blah." And they're like, "Where'd you get that from?" I'm like, "Oh, I think we made it."
Yeah, we developed that. Yeah.
I forgot about that. I think we just kind of came up with it. I don't know. It goes back to the most fun thing about having your own business or being part of a great team is like the good ideas win. We went to we're part of the Metal Treating Institute, MTI. We went to a conference. We heard a speaker. It really resonated with Diana and I. We brought it back to the team. We're like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And we're kind of running with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, and I personally, you're kind of like hitting me, because I'm like, I need to put some thought into this, not only from the business perspective. I mean, we have the things that I preach, but are they codified, right?
Yeah, I think that what I heard recently, it's like, if you don't know what you should be working on right now, then you know what you should be working on.
Right. Exactly.
So you kind of need to give yourself a little bit of a magnetic north on some of these things, and I think it helps us.
Yep.
We use tools, and I think, but that's how do you keep things fresh, right? So initially that was fresh. Everybody was probably, first you got to get people bought into it. Then once you're bought into it, how do you keep it fresh? Because you don't want to do things that are just, I don't want to go through the motions. You don't want to do stuff that's lame, right? Like I don't want to work in a bureaucratic company that's doing stuff just to do it. That sucks for you. That sucks for everybody. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources.
I agree. So I want to hit two more quick questions before we wrap up here. So I want to think about how to phrase this properly. If there is one thing that the manufacturers who send you parts should know about heat treating, but they don't, what is it?
I think ready, aim, fire, and you will get your best results when we have a great conversation and a great collaboration. Heat treat is one of the final processes, which is tricky because we have a lot of power in that we could accidentally screw up a part, or we help it get across the finish line. And bringing heat treating into the process, into the design phase, and the actual, not just like what hardness you want, but like the stacking of processes will benefit everybody. Because we hit on this very quickly at the beginning. I'm part of another company called Laser Hard, and people come to us with, hey, they just want to do surface treat. I'm like, well, what are your core properties? So the order of operations in heat treating is critical, and if you can have us involved sooner, we'll probably save you money on, grind stock, setup, and everything will flow through faster with humps or bumps, and you're not like hitting all those things on the first article. And
so are you saying like all the way back kind of in the design
phase?
Okay.
Somebody should be reaching out and potentially talking about it.
Interesting.
And we're having more of that, right? But that's the fun part about getting bigger in a way, because when you're dealing with the 1 or 2 man job shop, usually they're working for somebody who's working for somebody who's working for somebody. So they have no print control, right?
Yep.
And so they can't even have that conversation, which is frustrating for them and us at times, where it's like, there's a better way to do this. Like, yeah, but we can't.
Yep.
Whereas as you get bigger and you get to where you're dealing with somebody who's making the part, doing the design, that's been one of the most fun parts about our job as we get bigger, and you can like reach across the table and have these great conversations in the design phase, in the print rev phase. It makes everything better, like from the top down, because it's like, wow, like, okay, they feel like you know what you're talking about. You feel like you have a collaboration. The work comes in. Everybody is learning good things as the work flows through the shop because it has a good design intent, and you're not trying to explain why something doesn't really make sense or this isn't utilized, which would kind of go back to use it up, right? Like, let's utilize all of our processes. Let's utilize all of our resources.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. And I mean, certainly getting you guys involved early in the process, something I wouldn't necessarily have thought about.
Yeah, we're the last process, but please think about us at the beginning, because we have an opportunity to save a lot of time and money, I think.
Gotcha.
And maybe if it's even like, well, you want it that hard, but should we be through hardening it? Should we be nitriding it? Should we be carburizing it? Should we be laser hardening it? Like, we have a host of ways to achieve that hardness.
Right.
And depending on your design, maybe we can talk about what's the best fit for you and your customer.
Yep. Okay. Last question. So I'm obviously in the the lead generation space. I like to help manufacturers grow and get more business. So if you had one piece of advice that you feel could apply to kind of a broad range of different manufacturers or service providers like yourself that has been successful for you in business development, what would that piece of advice be?
I think don't be afraid of doing new things. Like when you and I met, you said, hey, have you ever done a podcast? And I'm like, yeah, one. And it got us a huge customer.
Yeah.
And it's initially I thought doing that would be totally ridiculous. And then I still catch myself thinking it's ridiculous, but it's like you did one and you got a giant customer for Peters and Laser Hard. So I think you need to be willing to put yourself out there. And going back to, wasted time, usually in manufacturing, you're thinking about like, how can I train this guy? How can I, fix this piece of equipment? How can I get this thing out the door? But, if you're, Diana and her team, they do some of our social stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, it's probably important for me to help them write their social posts and everything like that too, because that's how we get the information out there.
Right.
And I think you just need to be willing. As a manufacturer, it feels kind of woo-woo to be in this space. But if we want to circle all the way back to how do we get more people interested, how do we get the younger generation interested? How do we bring knowledge to this? How do we create interest? It's through trying to do things maybe a little bit differently because we have to. Because we know what we did before didn't necessarily work as well as we hoped it would.
Yep.
So being able to be vulnerable in a space like this or the other digital spaces, I think is critical. Yep. And don't be afraid to put money in it to it, because I think a lot of people are afraid. My wife was a senior media planner buyer for a large advertising company.
Sure.
So she knows what budgets are. And then I've had people call me because they're like, hey, I like your website. I like this, that, or the other. I'm like, okay, we used such and such, such and such. Like, yeah, I talked to them and they said it was a lot of money. And I'm like, thinking to myself, Dinah told me that was really cheap.
Right.
And so it's just...
Yeah, what is a lot of money, right?
What is a lot of money?
I see this so often where, you've got a manufacturer that's, they just spent $1 million on a piece of machinery. And it's just sitting there. And they won't spend $10,000 to get the customers to fill that piece of machinery up.
You're exactly right. And I think you have to give everything enough time and maybe they spend $10,000 and they use the wrong company.
Right.
Or maybe that company didn't have the right keywords, or that company wasn't driving the right campaign, or that company didn't understand all that stuff. I think whether you want to or not, that you have to understand part of that, or you have to have somebody you trust understand part of that. And I'm very fortunate that, my wife
is a marketing person. Yeah,
Yeah, like that we have like
that also
that we have
understands
like
heat
this
treating.
top level. Well, she doesn't have to understand heat treating, right? Like I can understand heat treating, she can understand that, and then we can work together as a team.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep,
So it's
that's
like
great.
we are incredibly lucky
Yeah.
to have like that level of talent in a family company
Yep.
doing our media and social and advertising. Like
Yep.
it's incredible. And
Yep.
I think that's a lot of how we've driven a lot of our growth. You know what I mean?
I'm not surprised.
Our
Yeah.
our team has grown and been there to support it, and all of the goodwill that our team has created through all of our customers who said, "Yeah, we use Peters," and they recommended us. We have all that organic stuff,
Right.
but also what Diana has done is also, it's undeniable that that's aided in it as
Right.
well.
Yeah, I mean, because doing a good job is one thing, but a lot of companies are doing it in a vacuum, right? I mean, if nobody knows about it, right, does it matter?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it matters obviously to the person you did a good job for, but how is anybody else going to be able to benefit from that?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice too. And, for me, obviously I'm a big believer in the digital marketing, but it is important. And a lot of companies have gotten burnt before hiring a company that didn't understand manufacturing. And that's really the big benefit that we bring to the table for a lot of our customers, is that we might not know exactly what you do, but we have enough experience with manufacturing to wrap our heads around it and then be able to communicate it intelligently to an audience. So it's cool that you have that mechanism set up and that it's working well for you.
Yeah.
But, well, hey, thanks so much for joining today, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
I love the stuff that we talked about. I mean, we just got into all of it. And maybe not all manufacturing related, but certainly topical, interesting stuff that a lot of people are thinking about.
Yeah, everything's everything.
Yep.
So,
All right. Thank you.
Yep.